That's for us! Start your Saturday mornings on CBS with the Berenstian Bears!
Welcome back to Deep in Bear Country. Today I am doing something completely different. This came to my attention that this week we missed a huge anniversary, which I should have addressed last weekend, so we're going to do it this weekend. That's right, you are probably thinking to yourself, Phil, I know exactly what the anniversary is. The anniversary is the 40th anniversary of the premiere of the first episode of the 1985 CBS series, The Berenstain Bears. This was a watershed moment for Berenstain Bears fans, for children of the 80s, and for CBS in general. 1985 was kind of a big deal when it came to Saturday morning television. Now, for those of you who didn't live through the 80s, who lived through maybe the 60s and the 70s and think you know what Saturday morning TV was, you're wrong. You're wrong. Saturday morning TV really hit its stride in the 1980s and then fell off precipitously in the 1990s because the 80s marked a moment where the Reagan administration, President Reagan, decided, hey, it's probably okay for children to be marketed to directly. See, up until the 1980s, the early 80s, it was against the law or against FCC regulations. I don't actually understand how it all worked, to create a TV show based on a pre-existing property that had been developed for children. So in order to circumvent that, advertisers would basically just sort of advertise for their products during children's programming, and Saturday morning was a time when kids were mostly at home. So it was decided that would be a block of purely children's programming, and that's when they would really aim like sugary cereals and children's events and toys at children. But then in the 80s, the rule was changed. You suddenly were allowed to market directly to children by creating cartoons that were ultimately just ads for toys. And that gave rise to, I believe, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe was the first to fully take advantage of that. But that was followed soon on by the revamp of G.I. Joe, by Transformers. We had GoBots into the mix, and then just every single thing you could market towards children was given its Saturday morning moment, its Saturday morning chance, from American Greetings characters like Strawberry Shortcake and Rainbow Bright, all the way up through rated R films like Rambo and RoboCop. You had popular movies like The Karate Kid, which ended up becoming big Saturday morning hits, and teenage movies like Teen Wolf that became Saturday morning successes as well. But in between all of these sort of mercenary attempts to capture the money and attention of children, there were a few standout original series. We had things like Galaxy High School that was like, let's craft original storytelling for kids that touches on social issues, but also has decent writing and good animation and high quality voice acting. And right in the midst of all of this, sort of the happy medium between recognizable IPs, but also original stories with decent storytelling, was the Berenstain Bears. 1985, directly, at times written by, certainly overseen by Stan and Jan themselves. This was the Berenstains' big push into popular culture, following a couple of decades of being almost strictly book oriented, but it wouldn't have happened had it not been for the TV series, the TV specials that came before. So if you remember, right before this, Buzz Potemkin and Joe Cates, I believe, were the director and the producers on the original special. So we'd had the Berenstain Bears Christmas Tree in 1979. We'd had the Berenstain Bears Meet Big Paw, the Berenstain Bears Easter Surprise. All three of these are shows that we covered. And then the Berenstain Bears Comic Valentine. And the Comic Valentine was 1982, and that was followed in 1983 by the Berenstain Bears Play Ball. And after that, they started to, we're like, well, let's see if we can like essay this into, I mean, we have all these pre-existing stories, we have all these books, let's see if we can turn these into an ongoing concern, an ongoing TV series. So Joe Cates and Buzz Potemkin came on board to produce the TV show. They got Elliot Lawrence, who had done the music for the specials, to come on board producing the music for the show. And what you will notice in the TV series is that they reuse a lot of his themes from the old specials, including songs that don't get sung again. Although sometimes there are songs sung in the TV show that have the same melodies and themes as the ones from the specials. We brought in a lot of the same creative staff, and Stan and Jan were on board producing and writing some of the episodes. So unfortunately, NBC, who had done the specials, wasn't interested in doing the TV series because I don't know if you were alive. If you were alive in the early 80s, NBC was going through some major shakeups. I believe that that was around the time, early 80s was that when Brandon Tartikoff started taking over NBC programming. NBC had been kind of a dark horse in the ratings for a long time, and it was with the introduction of their super successful. We had Cheers, you had Night Court, you had The Cosby Show, you had Family Ties. NBC was suddenly taking off as this powerhouse of not only ratings, but family entertainment. But there was a lot of shakeups in the higher ups at the executive level, and they were like, we're not interested in throwing the money and the time behind the Berenstain Bears. And so it went over to CBS, who was interested, and they decided to give the Berenstains a 13-episode first season. And they decided that each episode would be divided into two parts, a storyline based on a pre-existing book, as long as it's not a book that extolled the negative side of two things, television or junk food, which you may remember were kind of the plots of a couple of the more popular Berenstain Bears books. That's right at the top, is they did not want too much junk food, and they did not want too much TV to be adapted because it went against their interests. But so they wanted each episode to be based on a book for a 10 12 minutes chunk, and then the second half of the episode would be an original story that introduced new characters, that introduced villains, that introduced what I've described in the past as typical Saturday morning plots, things that would not have been unfamiliar to a child watching along at home. I think it was Roger Ebert who pointed out that on Saturday mornings, even Winnie the Pooh, even the 100-Acre Wood had ongoing villains, and those villains, I believe in the 100-Acre Wood, were weasels, which is funny because they seem to be the go-to bad guys for the Berenstain Bears. And what this 1985 series created was this wild hub of stories. It developed stories from the books, not only the first time books, but also a few of the smaller books like Go Fly a Kite, and also a lot of the stories from the TV series ended up becoming books, whether they were Cub Club books or whether they were chapter books, Bear Scouts chapter books. In particular, the ones involving Raffish Ralph and Big Paw became a lot of the sources for the Bear Scout stories, expanded, of course, and adapted to that continuity. But it became this hub around which the storytelling developed and borrowed and loaned and changed and created. This sort of forced a new world within Beartown to be born, and so they didn't want the more controversial books on board. It was produced by Southern Star Productions and Hanna-Barbera Australia. They didn't bring in the voice actors from the original specials. They got a whole new cast. They updated the look of a lot of the characters. They updated the look of Beartown to make it more modern, to make it more 80s. And this was the resurgence of Papa Bear as what many people think of when they think of Papa Bear, which is kind of the pompous, blustery, bumbling, useless father figure. When you think of when Berenstain Bears gets criticized, a lot of the time people are thinking, much like when the X-Men get criticized, when Cyclops and the X-Men gets criticized, most people are thinking of the 1990s X-Men cartoon as opposed to Chris Claremont's writing in the X-Men comic books. When Papa Bear is criticized, people are usually thinking of the 1985 cartoon series, where he is much more of a comic foil to the Cubs, where he is much more of a clueless, clumsy oaf than he is in the books. Even though I will go on record and remind people that Papa Bear was kind of a clumsy, bumbling oaf in those original stories. So it is hearkening back a lot to those original tales. Because it was produced by Southern Star Productions and Hanna-Barbera Australia, there is a little difference in the release order of the episodes. So if you look it up, I have vivid memories of watching this, and I have vivid memories of this chunk of programming because it was a huge deal. 1985 was smack dab in the middle of the 80s. We had CBS had several established animated series going on Saturday mornings. We had the Get Along Gang, which was returning in reruns. We had Muppet Babies, which were still going strong. Muppet Babies would continue for several years after this. One of the highest quality animated series of the 1980s. Muppet Babies was fantastic. They were introducing new characters. We had reruns of Pole Position. We had reruns of Richie Rich, Dungeons and Dragons, and the Charlie Brown and Snoopy Show, which was one of my favorite shows of all time on Saturday mornings. Still going hard. We were losing the Biscuits, which was a Smurfs attempt that never took off. We were losing Saturday Supercade because of the loss of interest in video games in the mid 80s. Nintendo hadn't really hit yet, and Atari and ColecoVision and all those had hit their massive video game slump. So interest in Saturday in video games was over. Shirt Tales had been canceled, but we did have these new cartoons showing up. We had Little Muppet Monsters, which was going to bomb, but it was a compliment to Muppet Babies. We had The Wuzzles, which was Walt Disney Productions' first foray into animated TV series. Surprisingly enough, Disney had never done an animated TV show before. They had always sworn off television animation. They said it was too low budget. It wasn't up to their standards. But at this point, Disney was really, really struggling. I mean, you have to remember that in the 1980s, Disney was seriously considering closing its animation studios altogether, focusing entirely on the parks and live action, because they were having a lot of success with Buena Vista. They were having a lot of success with had Touchstone been created yet? They were pushing out into adult fare, and they were making money off that. They had been bombing left and right with their theatrical animated films. So Disney was scrambling, and so this was actually the point. I love this, that Disney was like, we're gonna set our sights on television. We're going to produce 2 original shows, The Wuzzles and The Gummy Bears. And we are going to actually put them at odds with each other. So the Gummy Bears premiered this year on Saturday mornings, and The Wuzzles premiered this year on Saturday mornings. This was unheard of because they were on separate networks. CBS got The Wuzzles, NBC got The Gummy Bears, not even ABC, because Disney and ABC weren't even a thing yet. And they were just like, let them fight to see who came out on top. And ultimately, it was the Gummy Bears. Although, personally, as a child, I was a bigger fan of the Wuzzles. I'm just going to let you guys know that. Also, on ABC, we had premiering the Ewoks and the Droids. The Lucasfilm had decided that with no Star Wars properties being made, it was time to, push into cartoons. So we had the Ewoks and the Droids. They didn't last as long as they could have because it was like $1 million an episode. Those were incredibly expensive cartoons to produce. We had the premiere of the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. We had the premiere of the Superpowers team, Galactic Guardians, which introduced a lot of DC characters into the superpowers. We were moving away from the Super Friends, moving into Superpowers. And we had Scooby's Mystery Funhouse. I don't know if we had Scooby-Doo's Mystery Funhouse, but we also had the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, which was the first Scooby-Doo TV series to attempt an overarching plot throughout the season. It wouldn't pan out. They would never capture all 13 ghosts. That wouldn't be addressed until just a few years ago when they released the made-for-video movie, the 13th Ghost, I think, of Scooby-Doo, but where they retconned the entire series into being like a dream, or like it wasn't actual ghosts. It was weird. It was also the Scooby-Doo series that was like, yeah, there's ghosts in the world, there's evil in the world, and the ghosts have escaped. So what does all this have to do with the Berenstain Bears? What does this have to do with this TV series, the series that I've been producing? Well, first of all, I don't have a book to cover. I've lapped Mike Berenstain and I've run out of books. I have to wait for the next ones to come out. But people have asked me time and again, Phil, would you cover the TV series from beginning to end? You've done the books from beginning to end. Would you cover the TV series? And I say yes. I've always hesitated to do it, not because I don't think I can, but because, okay, here's what I was getting at. I remember watching, I was 9 years old. I remember watching the premiere episodes of the Berenstian Bears. I was very excited about it. I had watched the TV specials and loved them, and I had read the books a million times over. And to me, the crown jewel of any IP was them getting their own TV series. Like that meant a Saturday morning, especially. Saturday morning was the quality TV shows. The budgets were slightly higher. They weren't the Saturday morning cartoons at the time were not shown after school. They were not shown during the week. You had to watch them on Saturday morning. There were no reruns during the week. And even when Real Ghostbusters split between Saturday mornings and syndication during the weeks, those were different episodes produced by, I believe, different studios with different budgets and different talent behind the cameras and charges. Like they were very siloed, because Saturday morning is where you put a lot of your heaviest, your biggest advertising dollars, because you had kids full attention. You didn't have kids heading off to school. You didn't have kids just coming home from school. You had kids who woke up like me at 5:45 in the morning, sat through the farm report, sat through the coastal wind report, so that at 6 a.m. you could watch Alvin and the Chipmunks as soon as it started, and then you were glued to the TV from 6 a.m. until 10:30 when the boring stuff. You knew that the boring stuff was starting when CBS Story Break hit, when Captain O.G. Reedmore came on. You knew that you were at the tail end of the legit quality garbage that was being fed to you, and you were getting into after school special territory, and then there'd be like reruns of the news, and then maybe like rerun like 60 Minutes Weekend, and like then you were done, and then you went upstairs into your room and played Nintendo or Atari, or you read a book. You did not go outside. If you were me, why would you go outside? It's the weekend. So the question is, Phil, would you? So I remember sitting and watching the first episode of Berenstian Bears, but then when I look up the history of the Berenstian Bears cartoon and look at the episode list, it does not. My memory is that the Berenstian Bears in the Messy Room was the first episode aired. However, it was the first like based on the book. However, if you look at official episode lists, it will always say that Go Fly a Kite and the Trojan Pumpkin were the first aired episodes, September 14th, 1985. I remember it as being the Messy Room. Looking up, it looks like the Messy Room may have been season 2. So that might be where my confusion comes in. So I went in to the U.S. Copyright Office, looked up the copyrights on these episodes, and it does look like Go Fly a Kite and the Trojan Pumpkin are there. However, the Berenstains themselves, the Berenstain Bears YouTube channel, which has all these episodes, lists them in a different order as well. So I think there is some confusion as to what aired first in America and what aired first in Australia, and what order these episodes were shown in within the body of the episodes themselves, because the Trojan Pumpkin on the Berenstain Bears YouTube page actually comes after the theme song. But Go Fly a Kite is listed as being the 1A episode. They're 1A and 1B, 2A and 2B. So I believe officially Go Fly a Kite should be the first episode. And so you're like, well, Phil, what does this have to do with you not covering the show from beginning to end? It's because I'm a stickler for order. I'm a stickler for numerical propriety and appropriateness. I want to be correct. So, going off the official U.S. government Copyright Office website, it is Go Fly a Kite and the Trojan Pumpkin. Those are the episodes that I'll be covering, because I am going to be covering all of these episodes, every episode of the Berenstain Bears TV series, and I'm going to be doing it live. I'm going to be doing it while watching the episodes. So if you go to my YouTube channel, you can watch me watch the Berenstain Bears. I will be providing commentary on them. afterwards that I will release as audio episodes. I will not release the audio of me watching them. That would not make any sense. However, before we begin, I do want to say that the voice cast for the show is amazing. We had Brian Cummings arriving as Papa Q Bear, and you might wonder, who is Brian Cummings? Why do I know that name? First of all, he's not Jim Cummings. He's not that voice actor. Brian Cummings, however, is a very famous announcer, and you all know his voice. Everyone here who watched a home video tape from 1980 whatever until 2000 whatever recognizes his voice. I'm going to play an example of it, and I'm going to play it right now. That's it. That's Brian Cummings. You know him. You love him. The voice of Buena Vista, the voice of Disney Studios Home Entertainment, the voice of Sony Pictures Home Entertainment, the voice of Paramount Home Entertainment, coming soon, and now our feature film, Brian Cummings. But he's also the voice of Papa Q Bear. He did a lot of voices. He did voices on Tom and Jerry Kids. He did voices on Two Stupid Dogs, Snorks, Denver the Last Dinosaur, DuckTales, a workin' Joe. Mama Bear, however, the recently passed away, the recently deceased Ruth Buzzy, you know her from Laugh-In, you know her for her many Emmy nominations. Ruth Buzzy voiced Mama Bear, and as far as I believe Stan and Jan were concerned, she was the ultimate voice of Mama Bear. She was who they thought of when it came to Mama Bear's actual voice. Also up there, we had David Mendenhall playing Brother Bear. He was a working child actor. You may have seen him as the son in Over the Top. With Sylvester Stallone. I think he voiced Daniel in Transformers. Working actor Christina Lang, who played Sister Bear, another working child actor. You probably knew her if the TV series, in the TV series Raggedy Ann and Andy, not the movie, but the TV show of Raggedy Ann and Andy. She was the voice of Raggedy Ann. Raggedy Andy was voiced by Josh Rodin, who also voices Cousin Fred in the Berenstain Bears Saturday morning TV show. There was like 5 working child actors at the time. They all were on Punky Brewster. They all were on the GoBots. They all were on Little Clowns of Happy Town and Popeye and Son. But Josh Rodin, who plays Cousin Freddy, he also played Popeye Jr. on Popeye and Son, Raggedy Andy on The Adventures of Raggedy Ann and Andy, and just multiple characters on like Little People home videos and the Karate Kid TV series. So we have that. We had Marissa Mendenhall as Lizzie Bruin. We had John Stevenson, who showed up as Bill Bunny, who was one of Brother Bear's friends. But Brian Cummings voiced Papa Bear, but he also voices Actual Factual, Big Paul, Horace J. Honeypot, Too Tall, and a bunch of other guys. The other male voice, adult male voice on this show was the one, the only, the inimitable voice of Fred Jones himself. Frank Welker shows up as Raffish Ralph, as Weasel McGreed, as Grizzly Gramps, as Farmer Ben, as Mr. Skunk, and every other guy character who's not voiced by Brian Cummings. So you had Brian Cummings and Frank Welker pretty much pulling full-time duty as all the male characters besides the Cubs on this show. The show premieres. It's a pretty big hit. It runs for 2 seasons of 13 episodes each, but that means 26 episodes each because there's 2 episodes per episode, which means 52 episodes, 52 storylines in the Berenstain Bears that went on to inspire and promote and develop and then get canceled. And then in 2002, there was a whole other ball of wax. So we're going to see characters like Weasel McGreed and the Weasel show up for the first time. We're going to see the reintroduction of the Bear Detectives with their sniffer dog Snuff. We're going to see Too Tall show up as a major protagonist or antagonist sometimes. And we're going to see Too Tall Grizzly. Wait, did I say Big Paw or Too Tall? No, we're going to see Big Paw show up as an antagonist and a protagonist. We're going to see Too Tall in a very different form, like not looking like Too Tall, show up as a very 80s teen bully. We're going to see Horace J. Honeypot. We're going to see Farmer Ben. We're going to see all of our favorites as we head into the coverage of the Berenstain Bears. So head on over to my YouTube page if you want to see this. If not, if you don't want to watch me do this, stay tuned, and I'm going to talk about the first episode of the Berenstain Bears. But if you're watching along at home, I'll separate this. I'll make this a separate episode for those following, like watching along at home on YouTube, because this has already been a half hour. And if you don't want to sit through this, you're not going to sit through this. So here I go.